Hmm. Sniffles for some reason.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow. His In Pit Lane presents this weekly chat. We're having some technical problems tonight. There's couple of us have got some dodgy connections, and also Streamyard is sort of playing up a little bit too. It's doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things to us. So at the moment, which is most unlike it. So anyway, welcome to what this is. Might be a short show tonight because most of us are struggling with the dreaded ABN at the moment. We've got all sorts of the. We've got all sorts of problems with our internet. But anyway, let's find out who has joined us tonight. We've got joining us in is Pete. G'day, Pete. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, Brett?
I think we're all right with our
Hello.
connection. I think
Yeah.
we're all right with our connections. But joining us at the moment in audio only is Dave Stillwell and Mark Jones. G'day guys, how are you?
Good evening.
There we are. That's Dave. We've identified Dave. Mark Jones, are you there? Are you
Yes,
there?
I am.
It
Yes,
is
I
not raining in
am.
Tokyo. It is not raining in Tokyo. Right. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So anyway, so we've got so we've got there. So Dave has an excuse. Dave's in the middle of is lurking in the middle of Mulgrave at the moment, having doing whatever it is he does of a night time. He calls it orienteering. It sounds like stalking to me, but anyways, that's I think orienteering is like stalking, with a competitive edge. But
I
this
think I think you're being a bit generous, Brett. People have been telling me where to go for decades, and I'm finally putting it to a good activity and good use.
Well, one place that you were on the weekend, which is the same place that I went to eventually, was Winton. I was just saying to Pete before we came on the weather on after a terrible what apparently was a terrible day on Friday. The weather was wonderful up there. It was when you get days like that at Winton. I mean, it really does turn it on, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and it's out of character for the first weekend in August. That's two weekends at racetracks in a row that that we've been blessed. I mean, it was probably less blowy than it was for you last week at Siberia at Phillip Island, but
Very much so.
to have 2 great days of weather for the 6-hour relay, and then to have 2 great days of weather for the competitive days of the Winton Festival of Speed promoted by the VHRR at Winton. Fantastic for grassroots and club level motorsport in Victoria.
Yeah, it was a really good weekend. Really enjoyed it. Was saying, as I said to Pete, sort of went up there very, very quietly, very, very slowly, and basically filmed on the Sunday. Had some stuff to do they had to do with John Bow regarding the upcoming Baskerville historic meeting, which he is the patron of, and I had to film some stuff with John, and then sort of caught up there. It wasn't the biggest field we've seen. The numbers were down, quite substantially, but there were a couple of interesting cars, and you'll see that tomorrow night on In Pit Lane at 9 o'clock on Channel 31. We've got a couple of really interesting stories and a couple of really interesting cars. So that's the one thing that those meetings throw up. You walk past and you say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, oh that's it," and then suddenly you go, "What the hell is it?" And it turned out in both cases with these cars that we had they turned out to be they turned out to be very, very interesting backstories as well. Rachel, who was driving the youngest driver, driving the oldest car, which is a Model T special that her father built out of bits and pieces found at various garages and tin sheds and out in the open in paddocks all over Australia, and he's managed to create this amazing Ford Model T car, which I put a photo up on Facebook, and it was terrific. And his daughter runs that, and she's only a young girl herself, and Rachel Brown, and she's got a really interesting story. She's currently hoping to make a career in motorsport, but not behind the wheel, as she wants to be an engineer with a supercar team one day. And she's she put in a really good performance. So congratulations to Rachel. But it was a good day. It was a really good day. So let's talk about what's been happening. I better fire up the. We'll find out who's with us. Of course, Box is with us. I'm saying hope all are well. I think we're Peter. You well?
Yep.
Pete's well. Dave's been running around, so I take it you're well, Dave.
I'm still well.
Boom, of course.
Pun.
And yes. If puns are outlawed, only outlaws will have puns. And Mark, even though we can't see you, thanks to our wonderful internet, how are you?
I'm travelling quite all right. I'm getting increasingly excited as the days go by for my favourite event of the year coming up weekend after next.
Which is?
The Leeburn Historic Sprints.
Okay.
Oh, I was under the impression that was actually last week, so that's still coming up, is it?
Still coming up, yes. August 1920 weekend. And yes, we're all getting very fired up for that.
And joining us, I think he's got online. He's just been getting himself prepared. Looks like he's just dragged himself out of bed. Actually, it's Doc. G'day, Doc.
G'day, everyone. No, just first world problems dealing with my superannuation. That's enough to put anyone to sleep, isn't it?
Speaking of going to sleep, Jeremy's asking, g'day Aussies, how about that rugby? Oh, Jeremy, we should point out that apart from Mark, who is in Queensland, where they actually play and care about it, we are in Victoria and have no idea about or care about rugby, which is a sport that is played in private schools and yes, I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen a rugby ground in Victoria. Actually, I know they exist outside of as you go past sort of Melbourne Grammar and St Kevin's and all the rest. You do see and Scots College. You do see the odd rugby ground there, but out in the real world, out in the suburbs, I couldn't tell you where you'd even play a game of rugby, to be honest with you.
Have been to only
the
Melbourne Storm. I've watched the Melbourne team
No,
play
that's not.
before.
No, see, there's a Victorian. I already know about that. That is a very Victorian thing to say, Doc, because
Well, why
that
do they
is
say
not.
why is it called National Rugby League then? 'Cause it's actually still called
It's
NRL.
rugby union.
Rugby.
Yes, yes. You ask anybody who knows anything about rugby union, they'll tell you that rugby is rugby union and league is something totally different.
But it's still got the
Um,
word rugby in it. And if
well, yeah,
and the
and
premise to the start of the conversation was rugby. She didn't say
well,
whether it was league or union
I
or
personally,
Olympics or
find
the
rugby
convention
union.
is that
Well, there we are.
rugby expressed as a single word generally refers to union, and league
well,
is
I didn't know
rugby
that.
league
But
is
people need to
referred to
explain that
as league.
beforehand. To the
Well, now you
uneducated
know.
to rugby, they need to tell you beforehand because I just thought it referred to all of it. If it's called rugby,
Yes.
it's called rugby.
League,
Yes,
otherwise known by its other name, which of course is the great game of rugby league.
Rugby league.
Yeah. Thanks,
Rugby
Daryl.
league.
Daryl
But
Eastlake.
the
Oh, yeah.
yes, look of the two. I've been to a few rugby league games, and I've been to one rugby game. I find rugby union to be watchable. I find it a much more entertaining game than league, which bores me rigid. But rugby union is. I have watched the occasional bit of a Bledisloe Cup or something like that, but I think they were. Yeah. Anyway, but all I know about rugby is that New Zealanders are very, very good at it. It's an absolute religion over there, and we never win it, and they always do. So congratulations, Jeremy. How about them? He's saying, how about the
Warriors
Warriors?
win. The Warrior on the league side. The Warriors, if they're so good at it, the Warriors must win every year, do they? In the NRL competition, then.
Who knows? But
Well,
So
just
moving right along, because
about
this is
4
a
minutes to go,
motorsport
New Zealand
podcast,
got
not
a
a ball
penalty.
sport podcast.
yes, let's move on from from rugby league. Let's talk about and other forms of footy, and talk about what's been happening. And well, coming up this weekend is Shane Van Gisbergen's back in the United States. Looks like he's
And
he's already said that
And
he's
Kostecki.
heading off. And
There's two.
Kostecki as well. Brody
There's two of
Kostecki
them,
is
yeah,
over
there's
there
two.
as well.
Yeah.
Also announced is the fact that they're not going to be the only sort of road racing ring-ins for Indianapolis. Le Mans superstar and DTM star Mike Rockenfeller is also going to be racing there on the weekend. So you've got a few road racing specialists who have joined the party. But Shane has announced.
also got their one of their guys over there too. He's very well renowned.
Yeah.
What's his name? There's the three of them. So the Kostecki, there's Gisbergen, and there's a Triple Eight guy as well though too.
Well,
Very
there's one of the
engineer.
one of the engineers is
Yeah.
over there and was actually
Very
at IMSA at Road America on the weekend, where it was a very good day for the Australians because Matt Campbell and Felipe Nasser took the win, and so Campbell and Nasser took the win at Road America, and also Josh Burden, the Tasmanian driver, won in LMP3. So it was a good day for them as well. So there's lots of Australians over in America, but next year Shane and New Zealanders, but next year Shane Van Gisbergen pretty much it looks like will be full time in the United States. Looks like he's relocating there, and as a result, of course, they've got to replace him. And what do you do when you're looking for a young, talented driver? It's you head to Betty Clemenco's Driver Mart and pick up a used Will Brown by the look of it. So, what do we think of that? I mean, it's becoming a bit like the footy. I mean, with people being bought out of contracts and all the rest of it. What do we think about it all?
Well, it's sort of a bit of a throwback to when Gary Rogers would bring in a new young driver and then would be, after a year or two, would be poached by another team.
Yeah, well, that's what sort of Betty's taken over that role, hasn't she? And Erebus. So, and Gary was famous for it. If you go back and you have a look, I mean, the number of talented drivers that he found and had contributed to, including people like Jamie Whincup, who some say is sort of the best ever of the certainly of the current group. Then he's he's done very well, and it was a ready-made market. But I imagine that if Will Brown has another year left on his contract, they're obviously going to have to buy him out. And I imagine that Betty would, certainly, and Barry Ryan would very much, I think, drive a hard bargain. So they'll probably do quite well out of it. They might lose. They might lose Will Brown, but they'll pick up some money, and there's plenty of young talent out there. Have we heard anything about who might possibly replace Brown?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I did hear someone's name mentioned. As a weird one, Anton Di Pasquale go back to Erebus. That was thrown out there as well, though, too.
Yeah, I don't think Anton is leaving.
Shell.
DGR. I think he's probably very happy to stay there at the moment. But yeah, there's certainly plenty of talent coming through Super 2, and there also, we know Dave. It sounds like Dave Reynolds is on the move, probably to Team 18. So he looks like he's heading over there. So that'll open up a position
That was one of the
Grove
funniest
Racing.
comments I saw this week was about David Reynolds and the Erebus throw around and Brown and all that sort of stuff. Someone said, who's going to go back to who? That was another one thrown out there. Well, Davey Reynolds still owes him 8 years. He can go back there. That was it, because he walked out that 10-year contract. Remember, 2 years into it, so
Yes.
he owes him 8 years. He's got to go back and he's got to go fulfill the rest of his contract.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, he had a bit of a interesting exit out of Kelly Racing as well. So and yet ended back with the team again.
Yeah, he's got an interesting.
It wouldn't be the first time
No.
that he's returned from a team that, a team where he's gotten over burnt bridges before.
But
Yeah, but Pete,
I don't think Barry Ryan would have him back. David Reynolds.
I think that would be sort of talk about.
That's the other side.
Yeah, talk about oil and
Do they
water.
want
I
him?
mean, that's very much that is very much a case of opposites not attracting. Yeah, Simon, go. Simon, how are you? So Noah Gregson being fired. Has he been fired? I know, as I said, he's being replaced certainly for. I know he's being replaced for Indianapolis by Rockenfeller, but if he's been fired as well, does that present an opportunity for SVG or Kostecki next year? It's interesting, as we've got in the ticker, that Kyle Larson is saying, he said, don't worry about all this, doing races, doing truck races, doing Xfinity races and all the rest and easing into it. They're just saying, he's saying, throw him in at the deep end. He's good enough and he'll adapt. He'll adapt to this pretty bloody quickly. He's got that much talent that he'll adapt pretty quickly, and we don't need to go through all this, leading slowly up to it. Just throw him in at the deep end, put him in a team, and let him go for it. And you would imagine
I thought he had to fulfil license requirements.
I'm sure there are. I believe there are some license. I mean, Simon would probably know in terms of the license. Simon's saying that it was confirmed that Gregson's been fired. So that certainly opens up for the rest of the year. It opens up some possibilities over there. But for somebody to replace him next year, be interesting to see what sort of deal, if anything, if there's any sort of conditions on Shane's appearances, whether he's had to sign some sort of agreement over there.
While we're still on, Andrew Edwards is the guy, engineer that's going over as well too, I think. So he's quite an accomplished fellow that does a lot behind the scenes and is not probably pat on the back enough, other than the guys that do that know him as well as others do. But yeah, Andrew, he's very highly regarded by his peers.
Jeremy saying would like to see Heimgartner or Stanway in a fast car with Erebus. Hey, so would Peter Adderton from Boost Mobile. He was very quick to jump on and say all this talk about Will Brown and people moving and all the rest. But remember Richie Stanaway. People do seem to forget that the guy was the guy was at the top level of international sports car racing in terms of GT racing and GTE with as a works Aston Martin driver. But whatever happened, whatever.
At GRM, people
Yeah,
haven't forgotten that, have they?
yeah, I think whatever he just didn't seem to. It just didn't seem to click, and it may well be that those cars just didn't suit him. They don't suit everyone. I remember, I had an interview with Elaine Menu, years ago, and he said, look, he said, some people they love that sort of thing. They get in there. They're very agricultural. He said they are very very hard to drive. He said some people love cars that too much power, not enough grip. He said they love that sort of stuff. He said then there are others. He said particularly if they've come from an open wheel background in Europe, who get there and go no, this is horrible. I'm not enjoying this
obviously,
at all.
I know what the incident. Obviously, that there was the standoff and what happened with the media and Gary and that stuff that weekend. What was it? What were they throwing around at the time? Was it the Volvos or were they into the Commodores at that stage? I can't remember what cars they're on.
I think it was back to the Commodores.
Back to the Commodores, and But not only did they see eye to eye, but he also dropped his bundle and didn't fulfill a lot of commitments as well, though, too. So Gary said, well, just driving the car is not just one part of the game. It's also you've got a contract and you've got work to do in lots of other areas. So if you're not going to play the game, you can walk away.
It'd be interesting to find out at some stage, what really happened, because there was obviously things going on in his personal life, things behind the scenes that impacted on that, because everybody that I know who sort of dealt with him in Europe said that this was not typical of his behaviour over there. He was always very media friendly. He wasn't sort of massively outgoing or anything like that. He wasn't a David Reynolds or somebody in that mould, or a Craig Lowndes, but he was reliable and professional and was pretty good with the media. But over here he just shut up shop and he wasn't talking to anybody and. Didn't. We certainly tried to get him on the show a couple of times, and as you know, we've had a better relationship with Gary Rogers Motorsport than most of the supercar teams. Gary was always very very open. Yeah, but when Barry was in, so it wasn't a problem that like the team didn't. The team were happy for him to appear, but he just said no, I'm not doing it. So. Whatever.
Yeah, but that could have been what was going on behind the scenes within the team, why he didn't want to do it as well too, affecting why he wouldn't do media. So it wasn't.
Either way, Peter Adderton is obviously a huge rap for him, and has basically said, wherever he goes, you would imagine that some Boost Mobile funding is going to come with him, because Adderton's got a lot of time for him, and just really thinks he's a top driver, and clearly you don't get to that level internationally without being an absolute top driver. But Mark, yes, Kostecki already did race NASCAR in America. I think at don't think at the Sprint Cup level. I think he might have been in one of the perhaps the Xfinity, or do you know, Pete? You're muted. There you go.
I think it was the Xfinity.
It was Xfinity, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was always very keen. This is the interesting thing now. We've got Shane's success has really opened up another pathway, because a lot of Australian drivers were saying, well, like supercars is as high as I'm going to go. I'm happy there. That's my level. I'm just going to stay there. Now you would imagine that if Shane goes over there and does as well as his potential indicates, and we've already seen in terms of IndyCar what Scotty McLaughlin's doing. I mean, almost won again on the weekend. You might think that a lot of younger drivers of the, even people like Cam Waters and those sort of people might be looking at, well, I wonder what options there are over there for me, because if they continue to be successful, you would imagine teams over there are going to be out looking for young talent.
Well, remember they're going to be 34 years younger, so Shane's 34. So do you leave it that late before you go and accomplish enough that you're here in supercars, or you don't make the jump from open wheelers here, or S5000s, or TCR, or sports sedans, or there's some great young drivers that are driving sports sedans we've seen over the last couple of years as well too, that have never left that series. They're just happy going out there and making it a social event 2 or 3 times a year. So, what age? I mean, Shane's left it, as I said, all the way to the age of 34 before he's jumped over the ocean. So, do the younger ones go for it early?
Yeah, well, you see Nathan Hearn's obviously over there at the moment, running in TA2, and finished second on the weekend at Nashville. So he's over there, and basically he's over there because he couldn't get her. He's in the Joey Mawson scenario. I mean, he had a drive lined up, and when Gary was still running in supercars, and it was part of, I think, Gary's disillusionment with supercars, what caused him to move away and concentrate on S5000 and TCR and other categories, because he was really frustrated the fact that he had a driver who was clearly talented enough and fast enough and reliable enough to drive a supercar, and once again, supercars' ridiculous regulations got in the way and prevented him from driving there. So he just went over to America and said, "Well, okay, I'll try my luck over here." And so he's
last time we spoke
okay.
to Nathan, he not only is dedicated enough, but he works a lot on his own personal fitness and nutrition. Remember, we spoke to him, Brett, and he dedicates a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and also gets on the tools. He gets involved in every single little area that you need to on the 1%ers or the 5%ers. He works on to be able to produce the best race car driver he can. And, he doesn't sort of live and breathe it completely, but he is...
Test 1, 2, test.
I remember talking to a couple of his mates, and he's got obviously some friends in different categories back here in Australia. They're huge supporters of him around the same age. And they said, I think Todd Hobson, there you go. Todd's over there doing speedway in America from year to year, from event to event. I think he's over at the moment racing around different tracks at the moment. And Todd said, and he's pretty dedicated to his sport himself, and he just said Nathan's an absolute freak. So, if we've got one fellow enthusiast is recommending he's good mate, and he's saying he's a freak, well, that's why Nathan's doing so well over there, and he'll only just keep on jumping in hurdles.
Yeah, well, he's done very well. It's interesting to see that, I don't know whether we discussed it last week, but Motorsport Australia have dropped their various requirements in terms of supercar license, and have just basically left it with supercars. And I think they want to be clear of it. I think they want to be out of it in case there is any possible legal action being taken, because I think at some stage it's inevitable that somebody with a lot of money and a lot of anger is going to turn around and say, "Look, this is restraint of trade. We've got a kid who, he's quite acceptable to Motorsport Australia to race in these things. He's got all of the talent, but supercars won't let him run unless he basically blows a considerable amount of his budget running in Super 2 and all the rest of it." So, yeah, I think that will eventually. I think Motorsport Australia have just thrown up their hands and said, "We don't want anything to do with this. This is your problem now. You can't blame us for any of this."
Yeah,
but anyway,
more into themselves even more.
As Jeremy's saying, Stanway qualified fourth for Bathurst last year, so he did. Yeah, so it's very clear that he can. The guy can. There's no doubt that the guy can drive, and I think the Gen 3 cars may well suit him. Well, it's interesting because they don't have as much downforce. Perhaps that was one of the things. I know the late Alan Simonson also used to say that it took a lot of getting used coming from GTE cars and then jumping into a supercar, and Alan could drive just about anything. He said, they're an absolute culture shock, but he loved them. I mean, if Alan could have got Alan was prepared to walk away from his international career if he could have got a full-time gig with a really top team in supercars. He'd have jumped at it. He said on a number of occasions to me privately that he said if I'd like to settle down at some stage. I'd like to settle down here, and if I could get a good if I could find something like a really good drive with a really good team, then I'd sign on the dotted line.
Speaking of driving them, though, it doesn't matter downforce or how much horsepower you got. You've got to be able to steer them. Ask Tim Edwards.
Yeah, they're having some problems with the steering, aren't they? They've got they're having reliability issues. Yes, that's what he said. Not fit for purpose.
Elaborate a bit more than that.
They're a front steer design, and apparently they're failing fairly regularly, having all sorts of problems. Not just Cam who had problems; they've all had problems apparently.
Yeah, they barely turn a wheel, and they have problems.
Boom, boom.
Yes, which is not what you want from a steering rack, that's for sure. Now, Supercars Australia said that they are looking at the situation, and ultimately they're saying they might even look towards NASCAR. The steering rack that's currently used in their current generation of cars is also a front steer design, but obviously is a bit more robust than what they're running in with at the moment. It seems that this whole Gen 3 thing was rushed through so damn quickly that they're finding all
the
sorts
armour
of
every week.
Yeah, all sorts of. They're basically doing their testing in front of all the crowds, and it's. I suppose it makes for somewhat unpredictable, or it should be making for more unpredictable racing, and it does at times. But there certainly, there seems to be a lot of the time, it's the control, all the control bits and pieces, which is most of the car, are the things that are failing.
Yes, everyone who's put their opinion forward has been vindicated usually, and the ones that don't put it forward say stuff behind the scenes, and it just seems to be a general consensus by everyone. They just started a year early. They really should have just given another year of development. And I know it was a case of there's no more Falcons and no more Commodores out there, but geez, they really, it was just a case of perfect storm has just hit.
I think that was it. I think the situation, particularly with Holden and the Commodore, I think it was a thing that if we don't jump now and if we don't get this Camaro in, we might not get the Camaro at all. And if we don't get the Camaro, we won't have the Mustang. Although it's interesting, Ford have withdrawn quite a bit of the sort of
funding,
subsidiary funding. Well, it's not coming from Ford Performance. Ford Performance and Mark Rushworth are saying that they are committed. However, he did rather pointedly say that we continue to look at the situation and
review.
And pointed out the fact that their priority with the return to Formula One was a priority, and we have they've got a couple of very interesting cars, also Mustangs, in GT3 and GT4. They're also running a one-make series in IMSA as well. What do they call it? The Dark R?
The Dark Horse R. So back in 2008, my generation of Ford Mustang, they did a one-make series car called the FR500S. So the standard engine, the gearbox out of the GT500, a wing on the back, splitter on the front, some really good shocks, and a set of control wheels and tyres. And that was, the Mustang Challenge car. That ran for 3 years under Grand Am sanctioning. Of course, Grand Am and IMSA merged in 2014, or for the 2014 season. IMSA, the road racing side of the NASCAR business became branded as IMSA. So this is really, we've come full circle 15 years later, 2 different generations of Mustang later. They've now come out with the Dark Horse R. So think of this as like a, 80% of a GT4 car. So it's the same 5-litre engine up front, 6-speed manual gearbox in the middle, same sort of size wheels as the GT4 car, but not quite as developed as far as the brakes and suspension and aero package is concerned. It looks like a really good thing, built by Multimatic. You mentioned that the realignment of Ford's sponsorship and partnerships is under review.
And
I think
advertising.
But it's important to keep it in perspective. Like, they've been the major vehicle partner of supercars for this is now, I think, their 5th year.
And it looks like we've lost Dave now.
No, I'm still here.
It looks like we.
I'm still here. I think we might have
lost Brett, I think.
You might have lost Brett.
I think the three of us are all here still, yeah. And Pete, the
There we
puppy's nodding. So, yeah, I think Brett's lost himself. Keep going, Stilly.
But, when we consider that when Ford came back into the championship in a big way in 2019 with the launch of the Mustang, you've really got to consider that, this is now the 5th year that they've been the official vehicle partner. They've just had the new Ranger launch. They're just about to go full electric launch with the F-150 Lightning and with the Ford Mustang Mach-E. So, Ford doesn't have an unlimited budget when it comes to how they market and promote and activate their new models.
Well,
so it's understandable.
Look at all the commitments around the world, still. You're mentioning, you've just meant an abundant amount of stuff. They've got to be able to toe the line and justify across each budget where their dollar is best bang for buck, or at least what committed to a lot of them anyway, don't they, Stilly?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this doesn't reflect on Ford, not wanting to participate in the series anymore. It's really just an observation that, right at the moment, with the way that the models they have coming on stream, there are other things that they can make that energy and investment on. And welcome back to our fearless leader, Brett. We managed to carry on without you. I was able to, pad out and fill the airtime.
You were very insightful. Keep going, still. You hadn't actually finished yet, so Brett, don't
I think people are reading too much into this. Ford, will in much the same way that we've seen, Ford come and go as a brand partner. The series in the last 10 or 15 years has welcomed Lexus, Porsche, and Chrysler Jeep Dodge as series official vehicle partners. So there are a number of different brands that want to get involved, that have wanted to be involved in supercars in that capacity. It's still the biggest show in town from a promotional perspective. And in terms of the things that it can do for you as an automotive brand or automotive brands in terms of the activation opportunities it offers you, it's unique in the Australian and New Zealand marketplace. So
I agree. They've got to look at exactly right across the whole spectrum where their advertising dollar or support dollar needs to go to be able to, just give it the best amount of exposure, and also, where the people are going to recognise that popular brand that's been around in Australia since the early 1900s, and they want to put their best foot forward. And look, if as we know, supercars have got a lot of sponsorship dollars from a lot of different, obviously, suppliers and a lot of companies that all. They're not short of $1 by the looks of things. So you never hear them crying out for putting the hat out to anyone really. So yeah, I did see a note about that last week, Knackers, that they took out the Raptors out of Winton. So yeah, that's and that's look. They've got a we're at the moment in Australia and there's parts around the world. We're looking at a possible recession. Have a look at interest rates climbing ridiculously high in America. It's a wonder we don't hear more people crying poor from over there.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Ford have got a sort of a reputation as well in terms of their marketing of being fairly brutal. If it's not working for them, they'll pull out pretty quickly if they don't think that this is going in the direction that they want it to go. It's interesting that late this afternoon, a couple of the Ford teams that have done some recent testing, there's at least one or two of them are saying, "Hey, we think we understand what the issue might be in terms of parity. We think we understand what's going on a little bit better, and they're fairly confident that when they come back and at the next round that things will be they will hopefully be more competitive for the whole weekend." It's obviously not much. I mean,
but yeah, just as a matter of perspective, like we're talking about incredibly tiny margins.
Yeah.
If we could get the Formula One grid this close over both a race distance and in qualifying,
Liberty Media would be bashing down our doors to find out what the secret is, what the secret source is.
Don't tell them that. They probably will. We don't want to see supercars for the World Championship.
Haven't you seen the racing for 20th place? It's like a world championship down the back of the field sometimes. But as a matter of perspective, given all the challenges that we've gone through in the last 3 or 4 years, the massive upheavals. I work in the automotive retail and logistics space. Just the struggles to get parts from different parts of the world, lead times on raw materials, availability of skilled staff to actually operate machinery to produce stuff. The fact that we were able to go from effectively 2 prototypes at the end of 2021 to have 25 brand new cars on the grid in Newcastle and effectively running close to flawlessly, with the exception of a few teething issues. As I said, step back and have some broader perspective. They're doing so well considering all the challenges. Is there a disparity between the brands? I think that's been fairly well reported on. But don't doubt for a second that that supercars and the manufacturers will be wanting to make sure that any thin edge of the wedge adjustments are made. But again, if you listen to everything that's come through, and even from the Ford team bosses themselves, they don't want to have a swing too far in the other direction and have a situation like we did at the start of 2019, where the Mustang was clearly, the car to beat and definitely had an advantage, at pretty much every single track.
Okay,
I still think...
I hear all your deficiencies, Stilly, but there is still one thing. The reason why has copped so much criticism is 2 or 3 reasons. 1, they set the bar so high. 2, they outspokenly say this is the bar and we're going to meet those expectations again. So when they don't, they've got to realize they're going to be opened up for criticism, and that's fair enough as well too. Because when you say you're going to do one thing and they haven't, then therefore they've got to cop it sweet, because that's what's basically happened. They have said openly that, especially, that's why there was so much, the press conference last year when they were talking about it, and they're just talking about normal journalists and normal very avid supporters saying, I'd like to ask you about this and I'd like to ask you about that. No, we're not talking about that. Oh, no, we're going to change subjects. No. When you shut down things like that and you say, no, but this is going to be our expectation, and you do not provide it, then you realize you're going to have to cop it sweet. That's exactly what's happened.
I appreciate that, Doc, but that doesn't get us anywhere. Our focus needs to be on the outcome, which everyone involved and all the stakeholders involved are trying to get to. So we need to give them the time and the energy and the resources to be able to do that.
You can't promise something and then not deliver it.
I'm sorry. How long have you been, a tax-paying resident of this country, contributing to governments? That's government. That's government 101.
That's right.
That's why I always set very low or no expectations. That way, both I and anyone else is never disappointed.
I agree. I haven't criticised like a huge deal. I've obviously only just stated facts, but I see all the criticism going on from just your average supporter, and I can see why they're doing it because of I can see both sides of the coin. That's why. And then you just let it go on and let it happen, and eventually, hopefully, it all comes out in the wash and everyone moves on from it eventually. But I can see why it's happening, because you can't ignore the fact that these things have been said or done, and then they're not being delivered. So there you go. We just move on from it.
I just want my my cockpit adjustable anti-roll bars back. Can't wait for those.
Yeah, I think I know one New Zealand driver by the name of Shane Van Gisbergen who would like them back as well, and probably most of the drivers as well. Look, I mean,
blue and red handles.
I have to say that, like obviously there's a lot of criticism from some people at the moment, but as you were saying, Stilly, when you have a look at the grand picture of the thing and the level of professionalism, within the category and within the meetings themselves. I mean, it's been an amazing comeback after the pandemic and the way they've done. I was so impressed, having not been to a supercar round for a long time. I was just so impressed last year when I went out to Sandown on the Friday that just the profession the jump in professionalism from when I was there the last time was just incredible. They've come on in leaps and bounds, and it is. Tony Cochran used to say, "Oh, we are world class," and I'd say, "Well, no, I've been to world class events, and I've been to to Le Mans and Macau and Super GT and all, and no, it's good, Tony, but it's not world class." Now I think you can say there's no doubt this is world class.
And the family interaction that they put on is very good too. The some of the sideshows and some of the activations and all the family stuff that they do it's fantastic. Well, I have been in the last couple of years as well, though, too, just before pandemic, and what they provide to not just a motorsport fan is it's entertaining as well too, which they need, because sometimes the whole family goes along and not all of them are interested in motorsport.
The interesting thing, and I think it showed, obviously Peter Adderton's been a very staunch critic of the whole situation, and he did point out, and I think it's worth pointing out, that if you have a look at the television ratings, particularly from the Sydney round, particularly the Saturday night race, the ratings were very, very disappointing. I mean, sort of a peak audience around Australia of 71,000. It was beaten by just about everything. It was beaten by the swimming. Obviously, it was going to be beaten by the footy and the NRL. The Ashes, it was the day before the Ashes, so that was obviously going to play into it as well, and that certainly outrated it. But as he pointed out, it was also beaten by Peppa Pig and Bluey and a whole bunch of quiz shows and so I think the television deal is a problem, and people say that stop whinging about not being on free to air. I'm sorry, all of the figures, and it's an industry that I know a bit about, all of the figures show if you are not on free-to-air television, you are missing out on a huge slab of the audience. And that's what's happening now, because Sydney wasn't live on 7 or 7 Plus or any of those things, and the audience was pretty disappointing. So I think it's something they've got to look at when the next round of television rights come up. I think they've really got to have a very hard look at that.
And in the past, the teams have actually said when they first went to pay TV, they said it's been very hard to get sponsorship since they went across to pay TV.
Yeah, I mean, television, it's ubiquitous. Free-to-air television has, and they keep saying, oh, yes, well, young people don't watch it. Young people don't watch free-to-air television. They watch Instagram and all of those things, and that might be true, but they don't watch supercars in the main either. It's interesting to note, even just in terms of the ratings, the pay TV ratings for the night, that the qualifying sessions and everything from the Grand Prix, from Formula One, also outrated the supercars, which is interesting. And I've followed the ratings for a long, long time, and that was never the case in the past. It was always, there was a hardcore of and we know that the Formula One fan base is expanding, but if there was always the case that the supercars would considerably outrate Formula One. Now that's not the case anymore. Formula One is on most weekends on Foxtel and KO. Formula One is usually above the supercars.
Well, there's your Drive to Survive effect. Speaking of TV deals, and obviously something I just seen on the clicker in the ticker, and I saw a lot of social media posts about from within the motorsport community, both within the dirt racing community and outside of it, was this recent decision by Speedway Australia in conjunction with Sprint Car Racing Australia, effectively that there's not going to be a World Series Sprint Cars again this season in 23-24, which is a huge, massive shame after all of the efforts that Dean Neal and his team in Western Australia have pulled together to get live free-to-air coverage on 7,
Which
on the
has rated
seven-
really well.
which has rated really well in Western Australia in prime time through the summer. This amazing, promotion of Speedway. The fact that there cannot be a holistic approach. There's no benevolent dictator. Supercars had Tony Cochran. Formula One had Bernie Ecclestone. NASCAR had Big Bill France. Even IMSA had Don Panos, and now IndyCar has Roger Penske. There needs to be Speedway desperately needs a benevolent dictator type to basically pull everyone together and go for the best outcome for the sport as a whole, which will flow onto every single stakeholder, every single individual track promoter. Let's make this happen. For whatever reason, there's still, all of the excuses about, COVID and logistics and all this kind of stuff. That's all gone. Like that, we've seen that with supercars, with the Speed Series, even with drag racing managing to come together with a TV package deal for the top level categories. Like, there's no excuse now. And the fact that, we're not going out of our way to try to promote Speedway in the off season from most of the other motorsport categories in Australia, it just beggars belief. Like, if ever there was a moment where Speedway could.
How good is the grassroots, though? The grassroots level of Speedway is fantastic at the moment.
Absolutely.
It's all basics. I agree with everything you said so far, because even the grassroots is so healthy. Keep going, buddy.
All right. But, this is the moment, with all the availabilities of, digital multi-channeling, digital streaming. I mean, look at how Motorsport Australia's, done their television package for Trophy Series. Utilizing the Blendline team, putting out a live coverage both on YouTube and on 7 Plus on the Sunday. Yes, it's sort of baby steps to start with, but it's bringing content to a free-to-air audience, no subscription required, to build a fan base and deliver product to eyeballs. And particularly for people that don't normally get that level of coverage.
We've lost Dave now.
No, I'm still here.
Yeah, he's shot him. He's gone again.
Yeah, we just lost Brett again.
Yeah, that's all right. But no, that's why I said, that's why I interrupt you, because as on the Speedway scene and the Dirt Series, and not just exclusively like the big tracks like Avalon, that everywhere you only see bits and pieces of it through the landscape of the media and social media. They're all very healthy. They're not getting capacity fields all the time, but they're getting good high numbers. They're not, they're thinking about it, I suppose, in a monetary as well, though, too, on a budget scale as well, though, too. They realise the challenges that people have got out there. That it's not just put your car in the back of a trailer and take an hour down the road and throw some fuel in it. There's entry fees, there's overheads, there's insurance to pay sometimes. There's a lot of extra little bits and pieces, and not everyone can afford that at the moment as well, though, too. So I agree totally. I mean, if you said, they've got to pull, I don't know whether they've got to pull everyone together like you're saying, Stilly, or they've got to bash their heads together as well, though, too, because they haven't got someone that, someone needs to take over and take control of things. But I just see it so healthy at grassroots. I mean, you, myself, and Brett and a few others we all know are all down at the 6-hour relay at Phillip Island just over a week and a half ago. And he's
back.
He's got to sort himself out first of all. Thanks for logging back in, Brett.
I think we've got some. Yeah, there's obviously some tech problems that we're having with StreamYard at the moment. I mean, Mark's had problems. Well, also Mark's been trying to get in all, and it seems that every time. So, and I'm dropping in and out as well. So it seems that that we do have some.
You need to turn the Queenslander filter off.
The Queen is the
is that alternatively known as the banana bender?
Or is your setup switching between AFL and rugby league mode? You're stopped in motion, and you can't. You've got to go backwards before you can go forwards, and it's called football. But you've got to hold it in your hands for most of the time, and you score most of your points by holding it in your hands. and then you score a small amount of points by kicking. Maybe it's just you just got confused by the great game of rugby league.
Over the bar, between the posts, where you going?
Over the bar, between the posts, up the bum. Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh, yeah,
Nothing?
yeah. Thanks, Mr. Hopawati. Anyway, yeah. Anywho, but it's good to have you back.
Yes. Anyway, so we're back. Jeremy pointing out that there's a situation over the Tasman. They've got supercars are live on Sky, but free to air in the Sunday Motorsports programming that goes for half the day. It's a week after the race. Yeah, that's traditional, that program. We've actually had some of our stuff as I didn't realise. Somebody sent me a thing they have like this Sunday afternoon motorsport program, and suddenly some of our stuff pointed out, some of our coverage of the Formula 5000s from when we were when we were covering it down at Phillip Island years ago, suddenly popped up on if you go onto their YouTube channel, a particular show, there's a and look for the Formula 5000 coverage from Phillip Island. That's stuff that we shot, and we had no idea that it was that it had popped up there. But anyway, it did. So whatever.
It's interesting you mentioned sort of the international sort of motorsport programming. I think it's quite telling that not only is Brody Kostecki going to race at the Indy Road Course, his car obviously is primarily sponsored by Peter Addison's Mobile X business, which is a US equivalent of Boost Mobile, or at least one of their newer ventures. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to scroll through all of his, I would say all of his tweets, but all of his X's about sifting through what's going on in the mobile space, the cellular space, and the what's happening with my wildcard space. But quite telling is the fact that Supercars is on board sponsoring that entry through their SuperView package, and they've talked about that ever since Shane turned up in NASCAR at Chicago, they saw a dramatic uptick in subscriptions to SuperView after his performance at Chicago. And one of the things that is also interesting is that not only is that branding going on the car, but I believe Shane Howard and another senior executive from Supercars is heading over or is already in the US for that event this weekend, to have a look at how...
So we can start the rumours now, Supercars to Indianapolis 2024.
Well, they're having a look at how IndyCar and NASCAR are running on the same weekend, two very different sanctioning bodies, two very different types of car, two very different types of race programming on the same weekend at the same venue. The venue, of course, is massive, and Handley also happens to be owned by Roger Penske. Obviously, it'll be a little bit of a meet and greet session, but I think it's quite telling that it's kind of around that SuperView. For the Australians and New Zealanders that don't know, outside of Australia and New Zealand, where your only real means of watching it is a subscription through either Foxtel, Kayo, or Sky. Outside of the Antipodean market, you can subscribe. I think it's $60 Australian per year, and you get access to every session live and free, including the supports, I think, sometimes. Obviously not the Australian Grand Prix, because that's a separate TV licensing arrangement.
Yep.
But what's quite telling is the fact that a lot of the sports, as they're doing their new media rights deals, are looking more and more at keeping their digital rights, if not exclusively in-house, retaining the right to do, yes, we'll sell some digital rights to a pay TV or a free-to-air TV subscriber, but we'll retain the right to, showcase it and archive it and provide access to it, as an over-the-top product. Formula One's done it with their world feed, with their over-the-top broadcast package. I believe Major League Baseball in the US has done something similar. And there's discussion that, some of the other major Australian sports, be it cricket, netball, soccer, rugby league, or the AFL, at their next, media rights negotiations, that maintaining possession and the ability to manipulate your over-the-top, direct-to-consumer streaming will form a critical part of any future rights deal.
The problem with that is, of course, you suddenly, if you want to see everything, if you want to watch Formula One, you've got a subscription. You want to see MotoGP, you're going to have a subscription. You want to watch supercars, you get a subscription. Super GT, you get a subscription. Everybody, I mean, there's only so much, and what's happening over there, particularly with the situation in America now, and was listening to some people in the industry talking about this at a forum last week, where they were saying that people are now have got subscription burnout, where they've just said, that's it, we're not doing this anymore, it's just costing too much money. We'll get one. We'll pick one. We'll say which one are we going to keep? Is it going to be Netflix? Is it going to be Apple Plus? Is it going to be whatever? That's the one we're going to keep, and that's it. Okay, we won't see the football anymore. We won't see the baseball. We won't see whatever. But we're going to just pick one because that's one that's all we can afford, and they just keep putting the prices up and up. And I mean, I got something, just from Amazon Prime. I'm saying that, your Amazon Prime subscription is about to go up by about $10 a month.
Brett,
I mean,
that's a scammer. That's a scammer. That's not from Amazon Prime. That's a scammer.
No, it was from Amazon Prime. It was from Amazon Prime. I've had them as well. In fact, I had one today. Somebody rang me and said, you haven't paid your Amazon. We're going to take legal action against you. I was like, no, you're not.
Just quickly though, there's two more little points, and I'll try and wrap it up in a few seconds. One, of course, is Australian as a society has conditioned itself for decades as well, though, too, on free-to-air TV. And the other one is the governments, and not so much the Liberal side, but Labor has always supported their free-to-air legislation rights in Australia, where there are mandatory hours that we have to stick to, and according to those free sporting events. So it also doesn't promote it, but it also the expectation by the public thinks it as well, though, too, and they will obviously want more as well. So, but yeah, for decades and decades, we didn't have subscription TV. And everything you basically got was free to air anyway, and the ads paid for it, whoever wanted to sponsor it. Well, it's been a slow drag, but as you said, it's had hills, it's had speed humps, but subscriptions and the competition between them all, and everyone's got trying to get their finger in the pie to get the money.
That's interesting too. That as Jimmy's saying that the Xfinity series will be on the CW next year. Now the CW is a streaming service, but it is, I believe, from what I was hearing on midweek motorsport from our friends at Radio Le Mans. And incidentally, John and all the team there, thank you for the shout out the other day. I very appreciate that you're watching. But they pointed out that apparently it is. I think it's for what they were saying. It is freely available. That it's either it's on as long as you have, it's a streaming service, I suppose, similar to ABC iView or something. But whatever they said it was really very widely available, and people didn't have to pay extra for it. So, and they've only just got into sports in general. The other thing is, you mentioned Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball within the over-the-top television industry and the online media industry, Major League Baseball has had a reputation of really doing a good job with all that stuff. Them and the NBA seem to have done a really good job. They were the pioneers of this stuff and have done a good job about it. Hey, listen, I just saw the time, everybody, and also Mad Cow Mark is going to bed right now. So I think that.
So it's late enough now.
So we know it's time to sort of wrap things up. Doc, just quickly, some Moto. What a fine little race we had at Silverstone on the weekend.
We're over time anyway, so yeah, I'll just let people have a look. I'm sure they've got an opinion themselves, but yeah, good little race as well. It was too. I gave it a bit of a build up last week, so I'll just let people. We'll do a better review of the first couple of weeks of MotoGP next week. So, and Triple B.
Yeah, Grand Prix increased the prices by about 10%. So, it's interesting. But once again, I mean, the record crowds are coming in, and I just, as I put online, Pierre Fillon from Le Mans is saying that they're going to push forward on plans to dramatically increase the spectator areas for the Le Mans 24-hour race, because obviously for the 100th anniversary it was sold out this year.
All
He
for
said,
bursting.
yeah, he said we're going to he said that we were lying, that we're going to push ahead. He said next year will certainly be booked out again, and we see that as being the case well into the future. And if we want to sort of grow and expand the event even further, and remember that place on a race day holds about holds close to 300,000 people, so it's not a small area, and so they're going to, and also talking about increasing the number of cars that would be able to start as well. So that will be that'll be interesting, because obviously there's a huge demand through hypercar and trying to fit in.
I'll need a few more extra tent spaces if there's 300,000 plus there. It's yeah, and the weather to be conducive.
Now, just quickly wrapping up, as Paul is saying, the Pro Motocross Championship finishes over the next 2 weekends in Queensland. There, so that's something to watch. Always spectacular stuff, and they're coming down. We've got some motocross happening down here in Melbourne as well, coming up, which will be in Pit Lane. We'll try and get out there. Now, coming up this weekend, as Dave's got on his lower third, coming up this weekend, and unfortunately it is a clash, but coming up at Sandown is the latest round of the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship. And across the bridge on the other side of Melbourne is the Victorian Motor Racing Championship from AASA, which will in fact have the return of stock cars to Calder Park, including some demonstration laps, weather permitting. There'll be demonstration laps and parade on the Thunderdome on both Saturday and Sunday. At least that's the plan. And if you watch tomorrow night on In Pit Lane, we talked to Zach O'Hara from Stock Cars Australia, and he's going to tell us about some of the cars are there, lots of cars with the history at the Thunderdome, but also some more modern cars that have come across from the Xfinity series and a few old Sprint Cup cars with some substantial histories as well. So you've got two things to follow this weekend. Either if you're this side of Melbourne, if you're in the east, you can go out to Sandown, or if you're over the other side of Melbourne, you can head out to Calder Park. I'm going to be out at Calder Park on Sunday, and we'll hopefully have some stuff from there.
Or if you're up in Queensland, you go to Queensland Raceway. I saw some pictures of it today as well for Mark up there, and Quinny's done some good stuff, and he continues to do so.
He's done a great job. We saw them in action on the weekend. Congratulations, Jordan Caruso, put together. Also, congratulations. Speaking of people who have been on In Pit Lane recently, Michael Clementi. We said, I think we can. I reckon, Doc, you and I, we can take a bit of credit for this, because I think if you remember when Michael Clementi was on the program, and we were talking about his sponsorship with Carl Cox and running the new Cupra, that we specifically said, Cooper, if you're watching, you should get involved in this. You should give the boy a hand and do a bit of marketing in Australia. Well, it was today announced that Cupra are jumping on board with Carl Cox Motorsport and Michael Clementi in the TCR. So congratulations to Michael Clementi and to Carl Cox Motorsport. And Carl's got himself a new toy.
Since you said that time, you wouldn't do it because of your physical limitations. He definitely owes me that hot lap he's promised me then in the passenger side. Remember, he said you can come along the track and jump in the passenger side with a helmet on anytime you want. So
well, about the only place you're going to be able to do it now, Doc, would possibly be at Mount Panorama, and wouldn't that be a terrible place to go for a hot lap?
What a shame to have to do it at Mount Panorama.
Oh God, yes.
There'll be the three of us up there. Still, he'd be banging my bloody helmet as I get in the car and going, knock yourself out. That's probably what Michael will probably do to me on a roll bar in the head as I go along it. So, no, he did say to me that night that he said he'd take me out for a burn out there in the Cooper anytime I want. So we were going to line up Sandown, but as you said, it might end up Bathurst now, so we better get our.
Oh yeah, Sandown. Yeah, they are coming out for Sandown. I think they're at Sandown the same weekend that me and Jason are across at Baskerville. There's so much stuff happening over the next few weeks. It's absolutely insane.
It's been over 10 years since we've been spoiled for choice in the Melbourne metropolitan area. So it's great. It's a good problem to have.
It's not bad, and Roy will be out
Oh.
there. Roy will be out there doing some filming as well for Motorsport Archive, so he'll be out there.
Bright
So
pink, not fluoro pink. It's just going to be bright pink. Is it,
Just bright.
Roy?
Yes, and I shall be wearing
Oh.
Salmon?
Sunday.
Bright
Oh my
salmon.
Nobody wears. Salmon is so last year.
I
What do
might
you
go
wear?
the grey, you'll
Chartreuse?
white, the beige. I don't know. I'll get something out of Richie's book and I'll wear that. I think Richie.
Oh, also they're running at One Tree Hill as well. That's a very
Oh.
very famous hill climb. So if you're up there, so there is stuff everywhere, and unfortunately the poor
Almost
marshals
everywhere.
are just going to be stretched to breaking point again. Spoke to a couple of marshals up at Winton on the weekend, and they just. I think something's going to have to be done about that because they're getting a bit burnt out and a bit. It's very, very expensive to be running around all over Victoria.
Another
if
one
they've
is
got to,
I go
so,
past. I go out to Geelong every Monday at the moment, and I look across as I'm driving along, and I think, Avalon Raceway. I've got to get out there. We've got to get out there soon as well too. So I know Christian, our good friend of the show, Flaggy, and a guest from time to time goes. So yeah, Avalon's another one. I look across as I'm driving past twice a day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've got their. I think Avalon's got their swap meet coming up. That's sort of the start of the year, and apparently it's a pretty big deal every year. So I think the Avalon swap meet, sort of kicks things off before they hit the track again racing. So we are coming into the speedway season. Also on drag racing, the new Australian National Drag Racing Championships, the sportsman class is kicking off not this weekend. I think the next weekend as well at one of the. So anyway, so it's all happening. There's lots of motorsport about, and I suppose we'll be back to talk about it next week. Remember, in Pit Lane tomorrow night. 9 o'clock. This is we're coming to the end of our winter hibernation, thank God, and hopefully we'll be back in the studio coming up in a few weeks' time. So Doc and I have got to get our heads around that again, and I've got an awful lot of letters to write and an awful lot of stuff to organise with a new crew and all sorts
I
of
think
things.
I'm based on that news you just said a few minutes ago. We should give Carl Cox a call and see if he wants to jump on board with the show.
I
as
have.
well.
Well, I don't know about sponsors. I've certainly invited Carl onto the show if he gets when he's out
Maybe
here.
some sponsorship
next
as well,
time.
though, too, since he's
I
heavily invested now.
think Carl's got a lot of sponsorship on there. He seems to be sponsoring everything at the moment. But yes, if you're out there, I'm not sure sort of whether Carl needs sponsorship and exposure on In Pit Lane. We'd be happy to have him on board. We'd be happy to have anybody on board for the next season. It would certainly help us out a great deal. So if you're interested in sponsoring the program, we do have some sponsorship available coming up for the next season of In Pit Lane, starting on Channel 31, first week of September. I think it's about September. But anyway, same time slot at this stage. Hasn't been 100% confirmed, but should be the same time slot. Incidentally, the block of Thursday night, as I think I said last week, the most popular night on Channel 31 by a long, long way. So
Fletch in Pit Lane and Rusty.
Yep. So and also the Pickers program or whatever, the Cash for Trash or whatever, that's very popular as well. So we've got 4 programs, and then later on in the night we've got sim racing follows us up. So look, if you're into cars of any sort and bikes, just check out Channel 31 tomorrow, right across Melbourne, free to air on digital channel 44, and hopefully I'll get this week's program up onto the YouTube channel as well, but that might have to wait until late tomorrow because right now I've got I've got things to do. So we will see you next week, and hopefully we'll have less technical problems, including Mark will hopefully be able to get back on, and I won't drop out as often either. So anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you later. See you later.
Have a great